Psychiatric emergencies. So the sons of guns making the USMLEs love serotonin syndrome and neuroleptic malignant syndrome. They love it so much because it's very similar. In both cases, people are taking psychiatric medications. In both cases, people end up with a strange body. They end up more tense. And we'll see what that means in like a few seconds. In both cases, they're agitated. In both cases, they have fever. In both cases, you have an altered mental status. And I've actually had a bunch of questions where patients are taking both. They do have a history of depression, and they'll say something like, and they recently started taking a new drug, but they weren't able to remember what. So, now you have to start thinking. Are they taking antipsychotics? Is it the antipsychotic causing this? Is it the antidepressant causing this? What's going on? Well, the way you'll have to actually differentiate it, okay? Because remember, in both of them, the patients are a little bit tense, all right? In both of them, they have the fever. In both of them, they have blah, blah, blah. Okay. If they say lead pipe rigidity, which they won't say lead pipe rigidity, but if you are rigid as a board, it's always neuroleptic malignant syndrome. If you have a clonus, it can't be neuroleptic malignant syndrome. Hyperreflexia, serotonin syndrome. Now, something else that they might bring up is how this came up out of nowhere. And there you'd say, well, if it came out of nowhere, it's probably serotonin syndrome. Neuroleptic malignant syndrome typically takes a day or 2 days, or takes a little bit longer to show up than serotonin syndrome. Okay. Of course, it goes without saying that you have to know the treatment for both of these. All right. You think of people with schizophrenia getting neuroleptic malignant syndrome, and you would think of people who are depressed getting serotonin syndrome. But they won't always tell you the drugs that they're taking. But they might do a good job describing the patient. They might say, a disheveled man hearing voices, doing blah blah blah, shows up 3 days later in the hospital. He's rigid as a board, has a fever, high red blood cell count, blah, all the stuff. Okay. Tyramine-rich foods with MAO inhibitors, you don't really see this often, but remember, phentolamine. Remember how it happens. Delirium tremens, around 72 hours, between 2 and 4 days after the last drink. Treatment benzodiazepines. I've actually seen this a lot. You have chronic alcoholics, they just keep drinking. All of a sudden, they go through withdrawal. What do? Load them up with Ativan. And it stops them from seizing, and then they come back a week later. Keeps happening. It's very sad. Acute dystonia. It very rarely leads to laryngospasm and intubation. You don't really see it too often, but they love testing you on benztropine or diphenhydramine. Of course, the problem with diphenhydramine and benztropine is that it's not immediate. Lithium toxicity. Took a whole bunch. What do you see? What you end up seeing is a bunch of GI effects. Nausea, vomiting. You see things like diarrhea also. Now, why do you hydrate? Why is that important? Because you get huge kidney damage if you don't. It can be very toxic to the kidneys. This is why people taking lithium, they always get kidney functions. Well, they always get their kidney function tested. Alright, so what do? You stop lithium. The answer is it's a miracle drug. You stop the lithium. And then you hydrate, of course. If it's super bad, dialysis. This is only if it's really bad. Okay. TCA. No, they don't really use TCAs that much anymore, but they still test you on it. And what they're going to test you on is they're going to say, an older gentleman comes in, abnormal heart rhythm, his wife recently died. He's not making any sense, and he's kind of fluttering around. Boom. Convulsions, cardiotoxicity. This man was depressed, wife recently died, whatever reason, he's taking TCAs, everything adds up. And of course, this prevents the arrhythmia. So the big thing here, serotonin syndrome versus neuroleptic malignant syndrome. There's one thing you can remember from all this. It's the difference between these two. Remember, stiff as a board, you're going to have NMS. It's also going to take a few days to show up, whereas serotonin syndrome is much more immediate. You also have a clonus, you're not rigid, and you have hyperreflexia, and they love testing that too. And remember, lithium toxicity, you stop the lithium. You hydrate, and if it's severe toxicity, you always do hemodialysis. All right.